My brother and I went with my dad's side. My sister went with my mom's side. So I, being the oldest, I think they wanted me, and then my obviously brother being the male. Boy. Also the only male in our entire family.
Yeah, entire family.
So I mean, obviously,
he got the special
exactly.
treatment.
So he went with our like dad's side of the family, and then my sister being the youngest and female. Like, she was one struggle.
Yeah.
She went with the mom's side. Her personality is like she grew up with like 4 older brothers who took care of her and gave her everything she wanted.
Oh, so you're saying I was spoiled.
I mean, I didn't say it. You're putting words in your mouth.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of BULGOGI Pod. I'm Hannah, your host, and today I have on 2 very, very special friends. So we got Iris in the middle.
Hello.
And Kathy on the other side. But yeah, hi, how are you guys doing?
Good. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm just happy to be here.
Okay,
Big
nice.
fan.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I'm also a fan of Iris's TikTok. I realized literally like this week, and right, we've known each other for like 6 weeks, that Iris is TikTok famous. And I've seen both of you guys on my TikTok feed. Do you also have a thriving TikTok career?
No, unfortunately I don't. I don't really post on TikTok, but I would say I would consider myself TikTok famous because I'm in Iris's TikTok. No, but I don't post as often. I just like being in whatever she's making. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So you are the star.
I would say I'm the face of the
Oh my goodness.
brand?
Yes, basically.
Yeah, the entire reason this is going to become a family account.
Yeah.
But this is going to be from Iris to just Catherine.
No, honestly though,
that's the change.
How it actually is, I feel like our cousin Nick is like the face. I'm like the co-star, like the support, you know, but he's like the main
he's
character.
Like
he's main cast. I'm the supporting cast, but I'm usually there.
Right.
I'm just right there with him.
Right. He would not be him without you and you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Got it. And so, yeah, I guess, a little bit about yourselves. Who are you guys? Where are you guys from? Any other details you want to share? If you want to share your occupation, up to you. The floor is yours. Maybe we could start with Iris.
Okay. So my name is Iris. Iris ZHANG on most of my socials. Something about, or born and raised in LA. First gen ABC, which is American born Chinese. Oh. That's a common term we use. And yeah, I work at TikTok now, but I've been working with a few agencies. I've lived abroad, was living in Singapore most recently. Oof. Moved back to LA for my current job, and yeah, met you a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
And here we are.
Yeah. And we met through my sister, who met you guys through your friend group, who met at Coachella.
Yes. So I met your sister.
The first time?
Yeah, because I met her the same night I met you.
Oh, right. That was the first night. Oh, yeah. We went out.
Yeah. You just happened to like not be able to go to your other event, I think.
Yeah. I didn't want to go to that other event anyways. So was that purposeful? Maybe. But good outcome? Absolutely.
The ROI.
ROI. And then Kathy, what about you?
I'm Catherine. I was also born and raised in LA because we're sisters. I don't know if we covered that in the beginning.
Yeah.
We're sisters. Yeah. Sisters. To clarify, I'm the younger sister. I feel like people oftentimes think that I'm the older sister because I'm significantly taller.
Significantly taller.
Okay, 2 inches is not that significant.
Yeah, I'm the younger sister. I also have a twin brother.
Ooh.
Who is significantly taller than both of us.
Okay, got it.
But yes, I am currently living in New York. I work in advertising.
So fun.
Love it. I've been working in advertising for the past almost 2 years now, after graduating from college, USC.
Guys, we all went to USC.
We really a Trojan family.
Yeah. We really like find each other, stick with each other.
Yeah, exactly. That's how it works.
Yeah.
And I've been in New York for the past 7-8 months. I moved in January, so it's still pretty recent. Yeah. So just figuring out life in my early 20s at the moment and trying to navigate that entire situation.
That is like the tagline for the past however many years of my life. So that is the tagline for like this podcast, especially. Yeah. So yeah, very relevant. But I kind of wanted to explore your guys' story because there was like me and Iris, right? We met that first initial time along with my sister, and then it was like, oh, like let's do a dinner. And so me and Iris did dinner. We like cooked. She kind of forced me to cook for the first time in a long time, and it was great. I actually started cooking more after that.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh,
what did you guys make?
So honored.
We made avocado and was it
salmon
rolls, spring rolls.
Oh, fancy.
And miso soup
with udon.
Yeah.
Wow.
During that dinner, we were kind of getting into like our life stories and like Iris, you and your family dynamic and like just like how you guys grew up was like pretty unique. And so can you tell the Kogis like a little bit about like how you guys lived and whatnot?
So just to start from day one when my parents landed in the US.
The very beginning. We're starting from the top.
So they came when they were in their mid-20s. So they came a little later than most. They were like already 25, 28.
Yeah.
I think they were here for a year. They were just like taking English classes at the nearby community college. They were working like day jobs, manual labor, like restaurants, etc. Just like whatever you can do to kind of get paycheck to paycheck. Also because their English wasn't that good, so they had really limited options. So when they had me like the year after, and then they had my sister and my brother 2 years later, it was too much for like just new young 20s, I guess mid 20s then, to kind of take care of 3 kids. So they,
on top of like just coming to the US and immigrating,
not knowing the language
at all, like completely brand new to everything, to parenthood, to the US, to working. I feel like everything, like they were just starting to figure things out.
Right.
Yeah.
So they just sent us back to China where we had family. And I think back then, like in the process of getting a green card, I don't think you're allowed to go back to certain countries.
Yeah.
So it was like an uncle who brought us. And then I remember because we knew it was like one of our uncles, but because we were so sad to leave our parents, we were crying the whole way. And we were at immigration security. We were like, no, don't take me from my mom. We got in so much trouble, I think, because I think we got like stopped at security.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Immigration.
Oh wait, yeah. He probably has some stories.
We should talk to him.
Yeah.
I think long story short, basically when we got to China, we spent our first few years there. And then I came back first because I was going to start first grade, I think.
Okay.
So I think once I was like almost 5, 6, I came back. And then they stayed until they were 5 or 6, and then they came back as well.
Oh, I see. And then in China, like what was that living situation like? Like were you guys living with family members?
We were living with family members, but we were split off kind of because at the time, our grandparents from both sides had other like grandkids. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah, they had like other grandkids that were living nearby or with them. So my grandparents from my mom's side, I had a few cousins who were a lot older. I think they were like in their 20s already when we were kids. So like they were kind of like,
they were taking care of you, because basically what this dynamic was my brother and I went with my dad's side, my sister went with my mom's side. So I, being the oldest, I think they wanted me, and then my obviously brother being the male, also the only male in our entire family.
Entire family.
So I mean, obviously
he got the special
exactly. So he went with our like dad's side of the family, and then my sister being the youngest and female, like she just one struggle. Yeah, she went with the mom's side.
Right.
And then we were still in the same city, but it definitely, I think till now I can kind of see how our personality is different. Like my brother and I are a little more similar. We're kind of or a little quieter, I would say, like calmer.
Okay.
And then her personality is like she grew up with like 4 older brothers who took care of her and gave her everything she wanted.
Oh, so you were saying I was spoiled.
I mean, I didn't say it. You're putting words in your own mouth.
Princess treatment from,
Right.
from the time
Seriously, though.
From birth.
But it's not your fault because you had so many people. We had like 4 uncles, aunts, 2 grandparents, all taking care of her.
Yeah.
Because they were like on more of the rural side, I think.
I feel like I was so young that I didn't even understand that they were my siblings, like when I was first growing up, because I feel like I almost grew up as an only child for like the first few years of my life. Like obviously I knew that they were like across town and we would see each other like once in a while. But I like grew up with like everyone taking care of me. But I feel like our dynamic was really different because I would say like my grandparents from my dad's side, like they're, how would you describe them? I feel
a little more posh.
Yeah, like they like have a better like upbringing, like they're like they had a lot more, which I think like they could take care of 2 kids rather than like me being like with someone else. So like my grandparents from my mom's side, like they're the type that like they didn't have like a lot when they were like taking care of me, but they like made sure I had everything I needed. And I felt like I like had a lot of love from them because like I didn't like need a lot. I was a child back then, but like everyone was like always making sure that like even though I was like the only one, like I was taken care of by them. So I feel like I really was spoiled, even though looking back now, like I always joke like, oh, I was neglected, but no, I was really spoiled.
Right. And it's probably like maybe a combination of those experiences. But you said that like you like were pseudo only child. Do people now like do they think that you're an only child?
No, they think they always guess I'm the younger sister. Like I always get like everyone tells me you are such a younger sister vibe energy, like do you have older siblings? And I think partially is because like a lot of my cousins who took care of me growing up were like that older sibling figure, so maybe that's where that is coming from. But I don't really get only child often. They always assume that I have like some type of sibling.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
Honestly,
no hate to only
child, but like
right.
I feel like having siblings really like you can tell when people have siblings. Yeah. Their personality is just different.
And also how you interact with other people.
Yeah.
And like
and this is also a blanket statement, right?
Yes,
like, this is a majority of only children we're speaking
about.
Every single one.
I know friends. I have friends who are only children. I don't discriminate.
Right. No, me too. And then for you, Iris, right? Like you being the oldest, like were you very aware of like this situation not being the most normal, like, right? Because it's not super common for like
I feel like it's really rare,
right?
Yeah.
And so were you aware of this?
Well, I guess I didn't know what normal was back then just because it was my family dynamic, and I feel like you don't really know what normal is until you get to an age where you talk to other people about like, so that's your family dynamic. But for me back then, I just remember my parents, even my grandparents, always telling me like, oh, make sure you like take care of your siblings, and I had that like care, nurtureness like installed in everything I did. It's like I just remember my mom going like, oh, take care of your sister, take care of your brother, and then my grandparents obviously going like, oh, make sure your brother's like has eaten first and things like that.
Wow.
So I didn't think anything was like not normal,
right?
But I can see now as I'm grown like how that affected me.
Do you want to get into it?
Like,
yeah, like how has it affected you?
I guess like being the, like for example, my brother, or maybe just, I don't even know this like most male or like generalizing, but he doesn't really like think to take care of other people just because. Like I think whenever I see anyone, I was like, oh, I want to make sure that they're taken care of. Or, like before I eat, I'm like, wait, did you eat first? So it's always kind of like, oh, are you okay before I take care of myself? Because when I was little, they were like, oh, did your sister eat yet? Or did your brother eat yet? And then I was like, oh yeah, everyone like got their food first. Like I give it to them first. Like that kind of is like still nowadays I'm kind of like, oh, I want to make sure everyone is taken care of before I am.
I completely relate to that. Like
single tear drops that you're like
literally like when you were saying like, oh, make sure you take care of you know, your siblings. I'm like, oh yeah, that was like drilled into me,
repeated over and over.
Yeah, like almost to the point where like I would like neglect myself, right? Like I feel like that has like impacted the way that I interact with people like so much. And so it's like in more recent years, I think being cognizant of that, I have made an active effort to make sure that I'm like also taking care of myself, because now we like learn like, oh, if your cup is not filled, then like you can't fill other cups, you know? And so definitely something I've been working on. And then I guess like getting back to, you know, you guys growing up separately, when you did come back to the States, right? Like, how was that experience for you, Iris? Like being kind of an only child, but also I assume like you grew up learning the cultural norms of like of like being in Asia, right? And so like what was that transition like?
Growing up in Asia, don't really think about it's not very like individualistic, right?
Oh, it's very like
it's
family.
Everything I do, it's like for my family, on behalf of my family, things like that. And I think coming to the US, well, at least when I first started off, it was hard for me to adapt because I didn't speak English. This whole time I was living in China, or I was talking to my grandparents or my parents. So I remember going to school, everyone was speaking a different language, and I was so confused. I was in ESL for my first few years, and then even after I spoke English, like I started understanding people, I was still in ESL because I was just so shy and I didn't know how to like.
You were so shy.
I was in ESL for the longest
up.
time, and I didn't have a lot of friends in kindergarten. Oh my God.
Interesting. So like even the way that you grew up a little bit more posh, maybe
posh being like we got milk every day, you know, like
got it.
Like, I had books to read.
Right.
She had like milk every other day. Like,
wow. Okay.
Not, like it wasn't that nice. It was kind of
right.
Like,
but it was like a little bit of a difference.
Oh, it was. I feel like also like you guys probably went to like after school and like all
we had
those
like drawing school.
Yeah, like they went to a lot of like extracurricular things, even like as like a 2-3-year-old, which like they were so young back then. But I think like my dad's side of the family really instills like education and like prioritizing that. And I think on my end, again, I was so young, so I like don't remember a lot, but I know for sure like I didn't do any of those like after school stuff or like tutoring and that kind of I literally actually now this like it's like a flashback now, but most of the education I got like when I first was growing up was through like my cousins teaching me. Like I remember like we just bought a bunch of books and then they would be the ones like teaching me, and then they would have like posters like up on the wall like math equations and like alphabets like, and I think they try to teach me English, but granted like they don't speak English because they are from China, never been to the US, and but I like do really appreciate, because I remember like they were trying to like teach me the alphabet when they didn't know it, but I think they knew like I'm gonna go back and that's something that like I will need. So I feel like I don't think I was in ESL when I came.
Well, you also talked a lot, so I feel like
I talked so much.
Right when she got here, started talking to people in Chinese, I think, and then they were like no one understood her, so she learned English to keep talking to people.
I'm like a talker. Like I can talk your ears off. So like
I love that.
But I do remember like
I'm a reader.
My brother and my sister were. My brother, my sister. Oh wait, yeah. I do have a brother and I do have a sister. I needed to remember that. But they were so quiet growing up. Like I think up until high school, they were like super shy, like kept to themselves. Like they were really, really reserved. Whereas I would talk to everyone. I would say, like, I think I remember like not being able to speak the language, but I would just be talking. And people would just be like, okay, she's saying something. She's saying
something. We don't really know.
Yeah. So I think it was also because my my grandparents from my mom's side, like they would talk a lot. Like they would just listen to me talk. Like I would sit there and I would just like talk to whoever, and like everyone would just give me the attention. But granted, I feel like actually looking back, this is like backtracking a little bit, but I feel like now as a grown-up, I look at this with like really positive takes on it. But growing up, it was really difficult. I feel like I was like the one that kind of was left to the side a little bit sheep. But like back then, like obviously like I knew that my siblings, like we all went to China together, but for some reason, like I was the one that like was on the side. And I do remember feeling like, oh, like confused about why, like no one really ever explained it to us, like what the reasoning behind my siblings being
together
and me not being with them. But like now looking back, I'm like, oh, like I really am so glad that like I was still so loved. But I think when I was growing up, I had a really hard time processing the reason behind that, and that actually like made it harder for me to feel close to like my grandparents from my dad's side. Like up until like high school, I think I never really had a relationship with them, even after we all moved in together. So I think there's a lot of like changes that's like happened, but I think my perspective from my childhood, if you ask me when I was a kid, I think I had a really hard time like being grateful for it. Like I always took everything as a, oh, like this is so unfair.
Yeah,
I always thought it was unfair, but now I think growing up, being a grown up now, I feel like I can look at it in a much brighter light.
So I mean, my next question was going to be like, for you, Catherine, like if you ever felt like any resentment or like anger because you maybe didn't get the experiences that your siblings got.
You probably know, but I feel like growing up, like a lot of people like to describe me as the problem child, like the one that would like always like cause trouble or whatever. But I think it's because like I didn't know, like I just felt like I had resentment, and I would just like not understand how to process my feelings, because I think also my grandparents from my dad's side, it's so confusing to say like grandparents from this.
And like Chinese, I'm sure in Korean too, there's like a way to say like
dad's side,
like
dad's side and
dad's side's
side?
like yeah nai nai, right? And then mom's side is like la 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 yeah.
So like
normally we have to keep thinking like maternal.
Yeah. They didn't treat me the best. I personally always felt like they like only saw my siblings growing up. Like even when I went over to hang out, I feel like I was always the one that like kind of was on the side, like I would hang out with them, but I didn't feel like they were my family for the longest time, because they kind of treated me like, oh, like you're here visiting and then you get picked up, like it's like you're visiting your friends, you know? And I do think like it made me feel like I needed to act out to get the attention. Like I remember, like again, earlier I mentioned that I'm a crier till this day, but I do remember so many times where I felt like I needed to cry so that people could like see me, like and I would just like all of a sudden start crying, where I think I would act out just because I wanted to feel seen, because I always felt so invisible whenever I was with them, because I felt like that's their like favorite grandchildren and I'm just here, so like if I want attention, then like I need to find a way to get attention,
and how else do you
get attention other than crying?
Especially at that age, it's like I'm either gonna poop or I'm gonna cry.
And then like when you're 15, you can't just keep pooping all the time, so like so you gotta cry more.
You gotta cry.
Exactly.
But I think I and also it didn't help when they were always like, oh, you're like a problem child. Like I don't think it ever helps to hear that about yourself. So I think growing up for so long, like I almost felt like anytime I did something that was like not what they wanted me to do, I was acting out. Like that's how it was like described as. So I think I had a hard time grasping that idea and understanding why I felt the need to, like, after we moved back to the US and after we like started living together, like I realized like I cannot be acting this way. Like I have siblings, I can't be acting like I'm like the center of the attention always. So I think living together helped me like find that balance again. But I do think like before then, like I always just felt like, oh, I'm gonna start crying so someone will look at me.
And so, you know, having felt like maybe a little bit of like distance between like you and like your paternal grandparents and like yourself, and like that's who Iris like grew up with, when you did move back to the States, do you remember like still feeling like distance between like you and Iris and then you and your brother? Like how was it like acclimating back into the sibling relationship?
Actually, I think you guys probably got along really well because they were in every year together, And because the first few years we didn't have any friends, or at least I didn't have any friends,
Yeah.
I would talk to them. So we kind of got close pretty fast just because kids always play together.
Yeah.
But
I would say I feel like I feel like I was pretty standoffish when I first came back. But like I think I was a lot closer to my brother initially because we're twins. So like we started going to school the moment we got back to the US. So we were enrolled in like preschool, elementary school, and I think at that time we were like in the same classes. And obviously coming from China, like we didn't even speak English. So I think when we were dropped out of school, we would stick together a lot because like that's like our comfort. I feel like it was harder for me and Iris to get along almost.
it's because she cried so much and I didn't understand like why you couldn't just use your words, or like, or I think because I was also taught like to be like respectful, polite, and like not cry and like say what's on your mind. I just never really like it. When she was crying, I was like, oh my gosh, like again. But I think, I mean, now it's a little better.
Yeah, but I think our personalities were so different.
Different.
Also because she literally had like the older sister mindset, and I was like the younger sister, where I'm like, oh, like I feel like the way we grew up was also different, even though we're only 2 years apart and like all that. I feel like she was instilled like, oh, you should be taking care of other people, and my mindset was almost like, oh, people should be taking care of me. So like I think that is like a huge difference in terms of like personality, and the way we like went about life, I feel like was also, it's always clashing. So I think growing up initially we didn't like, I feel like we fought a lot growing up. And I never fought with my brother, but again, he was really quiet, so I feel like he just kind of like
have a chance.
let me talk.
Got it.
Yeah.
We did not let him have one single word.
Yeah.
Between the two of
us. He was kind of like the middleman that made sure that we wouldn't fight, like we would get along. But yeah, I honestly feel like it took a bit of time for us to understand like the dynamic and being able to understand each other, because I feel like we were so different that like initially we would just fight about everything because you're not talking, like you're just you have one way of thinking, and if it's not the same way, then someone's wrong, and clearly not me. So
well, yeah,
duh.
Wait, and so from your perspective, Iris, I know that like sometimes because it was instilled in me to take care of my sister, I feel like I like am almost motherly. Like I feel like a third parent.
Yeah.
Do you relate to that experience?
100%. I think almost like every oldest child who were raised to take care of their younger ones, it's like we didn't just raise them, we were their mothers, you know?
Oh, yeah.
Like, I was taking care of them in terms of making sure they did their homework. I taught them. I would sit by them and make sure they did their homework and teach them those that they didn't know.
Oh, you went above and beyond.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But I also was, like, really mean. I grounded them a lot.
What?
I've been through a lot.
I had a phase where I thought I was an actual parent.
But I think to give her credit though, like our parents were always like traveling for business. So when we came back like around like middle school, high school, they had like a lot of business in Asia. So they were always gone. And our grandparents had moved here. So like they were living with us. But like every time our parents were on business trips, like Iris honestly stepped in as like the parent. And I always say this, but I feel like I would not be who I am without her, because
100%.
And I would say one more time, never say this to her face. I am never nice to her face. So like this is probably like new information. I can't even look at her when I'm talking.
Look the other way.
But I really like I think also our parents are not like the really traditional parents who like force you to like study. They didn't tell us like you need to be getting good grades. They obviously wanted us to, but they were never like up our necks about like breathing down our necks about how we needed to like go to after school and all that. They kind of honestly just let us do our thing. And they're like, if you don't want to learn, you're gonna regret it. Like they honestly have told us that so many times. We're like, if you don't want to do your homework, don't do it, but then you're gonna be the one regretting it in the future.
That's low-key more terrifying.
Yeah,
you know.
But the thing is,
as a kid, psychology?
As a kid, I'm like, oh, I don't have to do my homework. Like that's what I hear. But Iris is like, do your homework. And I was like, you're telling me to do my homework, but mom and dad said I don't have to do my homework.
Oh my gosh, that's so confusing as a
exactly
little kid.
Exactly. But I think
right answer.
like if it wasn't for her, like I probably would not be where I am, because like she was the one that was like, no, like sit down and do your homework, and I like hated it, but I would sit down and do my homework.
Wow.
So she was like the stern parent, honestly, that like made sure we like were doing well in school, and we like were doing things outside of school.
Right.
And I think part of the reason my parents are like that though was because my dad like went to college and had like all that education, but I feel like coming from China, they didn't have the same education system as we do, obviously. But they also like they were never instilled the same way that like education should always come first.
Except for, I think that side, like they are very much like that because my grandpa was a teacher.
Yeah.
So he really emphasized education. And there's this thing in China where back in the day, after schools were so popular, and still to this day, like everyone gets tutoring. As soon as you're able to walk, they enroll you in like
in some type of
like activity. So if it's not like sports or arts and crafts, music,
no dance,
language, dance, literally everything, you fill their schedule like to the like
like kids would come back at like 8-9 p.m.
There's like good motives because you obviously want the best for your kid. And I think when you grew up in a time where like when my parents were growing up, like no one back then had extracurricular activities, you know?
Right.
Everyone was so like, obviously it was a developing country and everyone was quite poor. You don't have like the ability to go learn how to dance.
Right.
You could barely even go, like you can't even go to a theater really like that. That's such a luxury.
Right.
So I think once they were able to afford nicer things, going to after school is one of those nicer things in life that you can afford and you want to give your kids, right? So that's kind of like where they were coming from, and I can see how the intention is good, but obviously like very excessive isn't. But luckily for us, we had like a good balance, and my parents really trusted me, and they knew I was really hard on myself. I used to like get a B and cry. That's the only time I would cry,
bro,
like, if I didn't do well in school.
Yeah.
But I would literally like spend the whole day like reading the textbook, and then
she would just like pick up a textbook and like just sit down and read. And I was always like, is someone forcing you to do that? Like you're doing that by choice.
Right. Dude, that was me too. Like
really?
Literally when you said I used to cry because of B's, I literally remember freshman year of high school, I got a B in geometry, and I was so close to getting an A.
Oh,
like I was
that's even worse.
I was like at 89 point something, right? Like it was so ridiculous, and I literally, my friends were over. This is high school. My friends are over, and I locked myself in my bathroom, and I was hysterical. I was hysterically crying.
Oh my gosh.
But then it's like my parents, like they also never, they were never like, you need to study. Like I think they did that so early on, and then I learned early on to just like be hard on myself. That it's just like, that's how I function from then on out, you know?
I think when your parents know that you're hard on yourself already, it's like you're already taking the word from them. They're like, you're doing my job herself. So that's why I don't think my parents were strict, because they knew I would like, if I didn't do well, I would be upset, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
And I guess like this is a little bit of a tangent, but like, you know, with that whole like hard on yourself mentality, do you, Iris, like still think that you are too hard on yourself maybe? Because that's something that I have been very conscious of recently in myself.
I think great question, because I feel like in the past few years I've like accomplished a lot, where like going to like putting myself through school, or us doing a bunch of things like going abroad, like all of the things I wanted to do, I have done a lot of them. So I've been working on it, because when I like back then a few years ago, I was definitely super hard on myself. Like even when I got great grades, got into a great school, I was still kind of like, oh, I can do more, like I can be better. I think nowadays I kind of realize there's nothing that's like perfect. You can like strive for perfection, but if you ever get there, like what else will you strive for? Like, you know, where are you gonna head? And you don't really feel the same like rush when you're like trying to get somewhere.
Oh yeah,
you know?
Yeah, it's not nearly as satisfying anymore.
So for the adrenaline, I just like very content with where I am, and I think that's helped me become more like satisfied with life as well, because it's like I don't need to be the best person in the room, and I don't even want to be, because I want to surround myself with people who I feel I can learn from, and always be in situations where I'm like, I'm okay. It's okay if I'm not the best. It's okay if I'm not the funniest or I'm not the whatever. As long as I am like happy where I am. And my dad actually does this thing now where like he'll call me. I hope he does this to you too. It's embarrassing.
I'm like, wait, what?
So he'll call us, and then the first thing he'll be like, he's like, oh, like, are you happy? And then he'll be like, oh, how are you? Like, are you happy? And then I'll be like, yeah, I am. Or like, and then if I'm not, I would tell. And then he'll be like, oh, why not? And then we'll talk about it. But I think that kind of made me realize, like, I don't need to be like perfect as long as I am happy where I am.
Wow.
Yeah.
I love that.
This is why my standards are so high. Like,
because of your dad.
100%.
Yeah.
My dad like cooks, cleans, makes money, and he's like very emotional.
Yeah,
like,
most Asian dad are like can't talk about their feelings, but like
yeah,
my dad is like my therapist, honestly.
Yeah.
Like he'll listen. Like he has like, actually though, he wasn't always like that. Like I feel like I was the reason he became like this. Not to like put it
right. Okay, all of a sudden we're changing it back to her.
He used to be so bad at talking about emotions, and like he would be so uncomfortable if you just cried.
But if you cry enough.
Yeah. But one time in high school, I went through like a really hard situation, and he picked me up from school, and he was like, oh, how was your day? You know, they always ask you that, and they expect you to just be like, yeah, it was good. Like, oh, like I'm tired. Like, he asked me, how was your day? And I looked at him, and I was like, and I started bawling, like sobbing. He was quiet for like a good 10-15 minutes, and he was like, what happened? And like I basically like was like telling him like everything that happened, and he like started like I think he could tell that I needed someone to talk to. So he was like the person who's there and was like, you deserve better, you should be like, you shouldn't be dealing with like X, Y, and Z, like I hope you know that. And I like never heard those words from him. Like I was genuinely shocked. I was like, oh wait, what is happening? But he was just sitting there, and I remember we were driving home. He was like, oh, do you want me to like drive a bit longer? Because like I was just like crying so much. And that was like the first time ever where like my dad was like open about like his emotions too, and he just like sat there and listened to me talk. And then since then, like he like really like I think was more comfortable dealing with our emotions, because also I think like he was happy that I was talking to him, because he didn't know that like I was like going through a hard time, and he probably didn't know. Like I don't think I would have told him, honestly, but it was just because like he caught me on one of those days that like I was like ready to like genuinely. And then after that, like he like was really, he made it a point to like ask us how we are, and would always make sure that like we are doing okay. And I think that's also like I also have really high standards, because I feel like I'm always like,
we've been treated so well, like why settle for anything less?
Girlies, I'm in the same boat. Literally, I'm like, oh, my dad is a pretty freaking healthy individual. Like someone who like not all the time expresses emotions, but like definitely has the capacity to. And so I'm like, dude, one question that will need to be another episode is like, are guys capable of having both EQ and IQ? I don't know. TBD. TBD.
I'll bring Nick next time.
Yeah.
Dive into that.
Wait, Nick,
my cousin.
Oh, got it.
So, a lot of names, a lot of family members.
There's also so many Nicks.
So many Nicks and so many Hannahs.
Yeah, my sister today was like Nick, and I was like,
which one?
Jonas? so confused. But yeah, getting back to, I guess, like the topic, kind of wrapping things up. And so, yeah, I mean, you guys would consider yourselves both first generation immigrants, yes?
Yes. Because I think we were born here first. And I guess there's a gray area if your parents came really young. But since our parents they came here and they had us like the year after. So like we're definitely like first generation to grow up in the US. So that's how I would say.
I would also say like I feel like I'm first gen because like my parents didn't have any experience like living in the US. When they came, like they were learning everything. So we're the first generation that like is really growing up in the US from our family.
And so I guess for maybe some other like first gen immigrants, what is like a piece of advice you would give them? And it doesn't even have to be specific to first-gen immigrants. But a piece of advice in general, maybe.
One thing that like we got really lucky is with our family dynamics, because I know a lot of my first gen or just like friends in general who like your family isn't someone you can choose, so it's really like luck of a draw. But I think in terms, because it affects like what you choose to pursue and how like who you are, what you do. But I think my advice for like first gens, especially like going to college and you're the first one in your family to go to college, like who are you gonna ask, right? Or like you want to do something in a field that no one else does. It's like, again, who do you turn to? But my advice would be like find someone who's doing what you are doing, and like just be like, hey, like you are doing something that I aspire to. Like, is there any way I can like ask you some questions? Like, how did you get started? So whether it's like going to college or doing like a job, right?
Right.
I think that would be super helpful, because that's what I did when I was the first to like apply for college. I like sat in the counselor's room and I was like talking to as many counselors I can.
Oh wow.
Like finding about different like scholarships and all the brochures, and I just like applied for a bunch of scholarships.
Oh my gosh, you actually used your resources.
I really did. I was like, I have no other option.
Yeah.
And after that, that's how like when it was their turn, I like told them everything.
They were she was the only one that like could tell us like how this process worked, because I don't even think she knew like Common App and like SATs.
I didn't know what FAFSA was. I didn't even know. I was like, what is it? Like all of these things, obviously you won't know until you're exposed to it.
Right.
But I think that's
resources.
Utilize them. They're like everywhere, and with internet nowadays, like everyone's really only like a click away.
It's so accessible.
Google.
I love that.
Google.
Duh. Yeah. And what about you, Catherine?
The biggest lesson I've learned as a first gen is don't be so hard on your parents.
It's also their first time too.
Because it's their first time through this too. And I think it's really hard to understand that when you're younger. I think that's something that I did not understand when I was growing up. I always felt like, well, why don't you know what you're doing? Or like, why can't you help me with this? Like, it's a lot of the little things where like they don't know what they're doing. Like also like obviously being like a first time parent, but I just think being a first gen child, you have to realize that your parents have no idea what they're doing. They are learning along the way with you, and it's hard to understand that as a kid. But I feel like once you're able to take a step back, you realize like they also took such a big risk to leave their country and come to a completely new place. Like my parents did not speak any English when they came, and I don't know how they were able to move to the US, not only move here but like find jobs, be able to like sustain their life and like be able to support 3 kids. Like that is so difficult, and I genuinely believe that it's the hardest thing you can ever do. So like for my parents to be able to do that, like that took so much courage. I respect their decision. Growing up, like obviously I can do that now. I should like literally sitting here, I'm like, oh my gosh, I should tell my parents this because I've never told them this. But I really like as an adult now, I'm like, wow, like that really took a lot. And I think it's so important to realize that like this isn't easy for them. And like one example, like when growing up, they would ask us like, can you translate for me? Can you read this? Can you explain to like this person what I'm trying to say? And honestly, it sounds bad, but like growing up, I'm like, why can't you just tell them? Like you can like I always felt like you can do it, like you can speak, because to me like my parents they speak like broken English, and like I think I also realized like a lot of times like they might be able to say what they want to, but they don't feel comfortable and confident saying it. But I would just be like, you can say it, like why do I have to translate? But looking back, I'm like, it's probably was so hard, like saying like, oh, like can you sign this paper for me? Like they can say it, but like they'll be like, oh, like tell them to like sign this. And it seems so easy for me because I learned English here, but like to them it was probably like they would have to like mentally prepare for it, like practice how to say it, like be so worried about like pronunciation, like things like that, where like I didn't realize how hard every little thing was. So now looking back, I'm like, be nice to your parents first of all, but also just like realize that like it's a challenge for them and they are trying to do what's best for you and like give you everything that they can. So just be patient.
Yeah.
Be patient.
I love that. I love both of those things actually, because right, I like went to USC, and then my sister also went to USC, and I think it was her junior year. I'm gonna flame her a little bit.
Yeah.
While she's not here.
Yeah, while she's not here. Her junior year of college, she calls me. I'm 2 or 3 years out of college at this point. She goes, "How do I find my grades?" And I was like, "Go to usc.edu, log in, go here, go to STARS report, click here." Like I literally went step by step by step. And so I agree. Use your resources, especially if you are not the oldest sibling, because I feel like older siblings naturally.
We already know.
I know. I will figure this out. Yeah. Everything is figure outable, as my
100%
friend Julie likes to say.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then even like, more recently, like I think constantly having to, right? Like we as humans are forgetful.
Yeah.
But one thing is like, I have to remind myself like, oh, my parents have never dealt with teenage or like adult children. You know what I mean?
And adult children.
Yeah, I'm not a teenager anymore.
I'm fully an adult children.
Yeah. But like I'm like, oh, you guys have never had to deal with somebody who like has their own thoughts and like own opinions, you know?
Yeah.
So I'm like, let's be patient. But thank you guys so much for joining.
Thanks for having us.
I didn't cry. I really thought I was gonna cry today, but
oh my gosh, we didn't make you cry. Damn it.
Next time.
Next episode. But yeah, do you guys want to plug your socials? You don't have to, but you please feel free.
TikTok, ZHANG.
ZHANG.
Yes. Okay. Give them a follow.
My Instagram and TikTok is Katherine Zhang with 2 G's.
And is
Katherine Zhang.
Okay. And is it Katherine with a K?
Katherine with the K.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
And then if you guys enjoyed this episode, if you guys want to support the podcast, please go ahead and subscribe on YouTube. Subscribe on both Apple Podcasts and Spotify, wherever you listen, because it really helps us. Leave a review. I read all the YouTube comments, so be sure to comment. And then you guys can find our like socials and everything else down in the show notes below. But yay!